Okay, for this lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can use completing the square in order to solve for our roots or solve for our values of x in our quadratic equations. So the first thing is, if I'm going to factor down perfect square trinomials, well, as long as it's got a perfect square in the beginning, perfect square in the end, then theoretically it is going to be a perfect square trinomial. If I'm doing a perfect square trinomial, I take the square root of the first, which is going to be x. The square root of the last one, in this case, is going to be 5. And then the middle term is negative, so I'm going to say x minus 5 squared. For example B, square root of the first is going to be 2x. Square root of the last one is going to be 3. And because it's negative in the middle, it's going to be 2x minus 3 squared. And for example C, the square root of the first term is going to be 5 x and y. Square root of the last term is just 1, and the middle term is positive. So it's going to be 5xy plus 1 squared. Now, anytime we take the square root of both sides of an equation in order to solve it, then I need to consider that it could be the positive or negative square root. Because if I said that, like in this case, x squared is equal to 4, well, 2 squared would equal 4, or negative 2 squared would also equal 4. So when I'm stating this, if I'm doing x squared is equal to 4, then x would equal the positive or negative square root of 4. And that gives me the two possible answers that could exist here. So, if I'm solving these examples using the square root principle and stating as simplified exact values, well, for example A, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And I'm going to say that a squared is equal to 64. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides, which means that I'm going to say a is equal to the positive or negative square root of 64. Well, the positive square root of 64 is equal to 8. The negative square root of 64 is equal to negative 8, which means that a is going to equal positive or negative 8. For example B, if I have x minus 5 squared is equal to 0, well, when I square root both sides, x minus 5 is going to equal the positive or negative square root of 0. Well, the positive square root of 0 is 0. The negative square root of 0 is still 0. So this would just be x minus 5 is equal to 0. Or x would equal 5 in this case. For example C, I'm going to say that 2x plus 5 squared is going to equal, when I move that negative 49 over, positive 49. Then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Square root of 2x plus 5 squared is just 2x plus 5. And that's going to equal the positive or negative square root of 49. At this point, I'm going to split it off into the two possibilities. I could say that 2x plus 5 is equal to the positive square root of 49, or 2x plus 5 is equal to the negative square root of 49. This means that 2x plus 5 would equal 7, or 2x plus 5 would equal negative 7. And then I'm just going to solve for x. I would subtract 5 from both sides and say that 2x is equal to 2. Divide by 2, and x is going to equal 1. In this case, subtract 5 from both sides, and 2x will now equal negative 12. Divide both sides by 2, and x equals negative 6. And these are my two solutions in this case. When I get to example D. For example D, I'm going to divide both of these sides by -3 to start. And I'm going to say that x plus 3 squared is going to equal -41. Then I would take the square roots of both sides, which means that I'm going to say that x plus 3 is equal to the positive or negative square root of -41. And I can't go any further at this point because this is mathematically impossible. I can't take the square root of a negative number, which means that there's going to be no solution. And for example E, I would move that -1/8 to the other side and say that 2 bracket x plus 1/2 squared is going to equal 1/8. Divide both sides by 2, and x plus 1/2 squared is going to equal 1/16. Square root both sides. X plus 1/2 is equal to the positive or negative square root of 1/16. And then, like with example C, I'm going to split it off into the two possibilities. I can either have x plus 1/2 is equal to the positive square root of 1/16 or 1/4. Or I can say that x plus 1/2 is equal to the negative square root of 1/16, -1/4. When I subtract 1/2 from both sides in the first case, I get -1/4. When I subtract 1/2 from the second case, I get x is equal to -3/4. And there's my solutions. For example 3, it says it wants us to complete the square to write this general form equation in vertex form and then solve for x. So I'm going to start by completing the square. I'm going to say that -3 bracket x squared, when I divide the -12 by -3, I get plus 4x plus 5 is equal to 0. -3 x squared plus 4x plus 4 minus 4 plus 5 is equal to 0. -3 bracket x squared plus 4x plus 4 plus 5, and to move that -4 out, I'm going to multiply it by -3 plus 12 is equal to 0. -3 bracket x plus 2 squared plus 17 is equal to 0. Now I'm going to move that 17 across the equation, and I'm going to say that -3 x plus 2 squared is equal to -17. Divide both sides by -3. X plus 2 squared is going to equal 17/3. Square root both sides. X plus 2 is going to equal the positive or negative square root of 17/3, which is an irrational number that I can't actually simplify. Or x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of 17/3. I can complete the square to solve all of these and answer them as simplified exact values. I'm going to do the same process I did in the last case. So I'm going to complete the square. X squared plus 12x minus 8 is equal to 0. X squared plus 12x plus 36 minus 36 minus 8 is equal to 0. X squared plus 12x plus 36 minus 8 and minus 36 is equal to 0. And x plus 6 squared minus 44 is equal to 0. Then I would move that 44 across. X plus 6 squared is going to equal 44. I take the positive and negative square root of both sides. X plus 6 is equal to the positive or negative square root of 44. Well, I can simplify the radical of the square root of 44. X is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the simplified square root of 44 is going to be 2 root 11. And there's my values for x, either negative 6 plus 2 root 11 or negative 6 minus 2 root 11. Example B, I'm going to start by simplifying everything that I have here, and I'm going to divide all these terms by the greatest common factor of 2. So I'm going to say that 5m squared minus 20m plus 3 is equal to 0. I'm going to say that 5m squared minus 4m plus 3 is equal to 0. 5m squared minus 4m plus 2 minus 2 plus 3 is equal to 0. Sorry, not plus 2 minus 2, plus 4 minus 4. 5m squared minus 4m plus 4 plus 3 and minus 20 is equal to 0. Or 5m minus 2 squared minus 17 is equal to 0. And at this point, now I'm going to start actually solving it. I'm going to say that 5m minus 2 squared is equal to 17. M minus 2 squared is equal to 17 over 5. M minus 2 is going to equal the positive or negative square root of 17 over 5. Or m is going to equal 2 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 5. And there's my answer.